Good evening and welcome to the Power of the Prosecutor. I am your state attorney, Monique Worrell, and it is a pleasure to have you here with us this evening. I'm so excited about our conversation this evening, but before I jump into this, I want to say this. Tomorrow is Election Day. Have you voted? If you haven't, it's not too late. You can still get out there and let your voice be heard tomorrow. This reminds me of Election Day 2 years ago when I was seeking your votes to become your next state attorney. And you came and you showed up and you voted, and I am here. But there are other great candidates out there who need you to show up at the polls tomorrow, who need you to let your voices be heard. So it is Election Day. Please get out and vote. Now, this evening, I am honored to have with me two very special guests. November is National Youth Homelessness Awareness Month, and this is a time to acknowledge those children and families experiencing periods of transition. As many as 2.5 million youth per year experience homelessness. And one important goal of conversations like this is not only to highlight the changes facing our community, but more importantly, the solutions, highlighting the people and organizations working to address these challenges. Your organizations are committed to supporting those in transition here in Central Florida. So Heather and Tasha, please introduce yourselves and your organizations to our audience.
Hi, my name is Natasha Young. I am the Youth Program Coordinator at the Coalition for the Homeless.
And hi, my name is Heather Wilkie. I am the Executive Director at Zebra Coalition and also a licensed mental health therapist.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. You know, a number of the cases our office reviews include a component of transition or those experiencing homelessness. Can you both define what transitioning or homelessness means?
Do you want me to go? You want me to go first, Heather?
Sure. We can take turns. I can start us off.
So, at the Coalition, homeless means, those individuals that are struggling to find housing or stable housing. Maybe they've been bouncing around from hotels or just basically unstable, living environments or unsafe living environments, those places that might be uninhabitable, people who are residing in their cars, living on the streets, maybe staying in tents. So that's really, some of the population that we work with at the Coalition.
Yeah, and just to sort of piggyback off of that, I will say that sometimes with youth homelessness, it does look a little bit different than the traditional stereotype of what someone who is unhoused or homeless may look like. For young people, sometimes they're couch surfing, maybe staying with friends. Maybe there was a time in many of our lives when we didn't necessarily have a place to call home, but we were staying with relatives. Unfortunately, sometimes those places can be unsafe. And so that's why organizations like ours exist, so we can help prevent some of those long-term homeless impacts.
Great, thank you for that. And can you tell us what specific services or programs do your organizations provide to those youth and young adults in transition who are also navigating the criminal legal system?
So at the Coalition, we have the Innovation Youth Program. And basically, our focus is to create a family environment for youth that are experiencing homelessness. And in our agency specifically, we serve youth from the ages of, in our program, the 5 to 17, and really just providing them with all-encompassing services, everything from educational support to life skills, career exploration, even helping those kids that are older, maybe transitioning from high school into college with, college applications or student loans, those types of things, and really just providing a safe environment and a family type setting for them so they can, learn how to overcome their fears and any of the obstacles that they might be facing to go on to, live productive, successful lives, however they deem that to be.
And many of the services that Zebra Coalition offers are similar. Our age demographic is a little bit higher. We work with youth ages 13 to 24. And one of the main programs that we have that works with the foster care, works with the criminal justice system, is in the foster care system. We partner with a lot of the organizations here locally that work with the foster care youth, and we're able to train their staff on how to respond to the specific population of LGBTQ plus youth. Our wraparound services, though, for youth in housing and youth in our mental health counseling program does include a lot of, not beyond counseling, a lot of job placement opportunities and stabilization through housing.
Thank you for that. Now, as state attorney, I got to tell you that the homelessness problem is of great concern to me, because all too often I see the criminal legal system being used as an avenue to address homelessness. And it's not the appropriate place for us as a community to address homelessness. So can you tell us how advocates in the criminal legal system can best support those who may be experiencing periods of homelessness?
I would say that one of the biggest things you can do is to work with the organizations locally that do provide this service. You know, we do consider ourselves experts in the field of working with LGBTQ plus youth who are experiencing homelessness. And so relying on those experts in the community is very important. We have a great network here through Homeless Services Network of many organizations beyond the two that you have here that do great work in this area. And so I would say that in Central Florida, we're very blessed to have such a highly resourced community. And so definitely rely on those organizations.
Thanks. Tasha, did you want to add to that?
No, I was just basically going to say the same thing is, it's really important to get connected with the agencies that deal with, with homelessness and get that expertise, just like Heather said, and making those connections for those individuals and not using, the criminal justice system as a solution to solve the issue of homelessness.
Yes, and I know that tonight at the end of our podcast, you all are going to provide information on how to contact you and to utilize your agencies as resources. So we'll be able to provide that information to our viewers as well. One of the things that I became acutely aware of as I was running my campaign was the fact that many youth end up being homeless because of their coming out to their families about their identities, and that they end up living on the streets and being subject to a lot of dangers. So along with losing their homes, their community, their friends, and their routines, as well as their sense of stability and safety, many of them become victims of trauma. While trying to survive on the streets, they're exposed to countless dangers with an increased likelihood of substance abuse, early parenthood, depression, and post-traumatic stress disorder. And one of the problems that, is increasing is their vulnerability to being victims of human trafficking. So, Natasha, from your perspective as a youth program coordinator for the coalition, why should the challenge of unhoused youth be a concern for broader Central Florida community? And then, of course, Heather, I want you to come back in and talk about it from your perspective of the Zebra Coalition.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that people should really be aware of is homelessness and poverty is this cycle, right? So many of the families that we have, even at the coalition, right, the adults that we have that are currently at our shelter, right, they started off as youth. Many of them have actually been youth that have experienced homelessness. And so it just becomes this cycle. And so part of our responsibility within these organizations is to help those families break that cycle of poverty, so that it doesn't become like this, long family, generation and generation where, families are just coming into the coalition or facing homelessness. The other thing is, just like you said, there's a lot of trauma that they experience, and whether that's the trauma that brings them into homelessness or just the trauma itself from becoming homeless, like you said, losing the stability, becoming victims of different things, is being able to address the mental health that comes with that. So what we've been seeing a lot more, there's in society in general, there is a large increase in mental health issues. So with our young people that are facing homelessness and experiencing all this trauma, if that goes unresolved, if that isn't addressed through some of these programs that we have where we provide life skills and mentoring, and just basic education, that continues into their young adulthood, into adulthood, and it becomes a cycle, just like the cycle of poverty, of these mental health issues, of the trauma being unresolved, and impacting further relationships and trust issues. And then those are things that we pass down to the next generation. So it's really important for everybody really to be getting involved in addressing these issues. And that's why it should be such a concern in the Central Florida area. Like, we all play a part in being able to break this cycle of homelessness, even if you are not specifically working in one of these agencies.
Yeah, and I would say, with our youth, LGBTQ youth experience the same things that non-LGBTQ youth experience. And so when you're talking about the cycle of poverty, intergenerational violence, all of the things that can happen to a young person, that's also happening to LGBTQ plus youth. But on top of it, there's a greater risk for vulnerability. And so that's why we often see such a high rate of sexual assault and human trafficking for young LGBTQ plus identifying individuals. And that often does have to do with the lack of family support or the lack of support in general, whether that's in the school system, your peer environment, or in the family systems. So a lot of our kids, we know that when you look at the population of homelessness in general, about 42% of them nationally identify as LGBTQ plus, which is a much greater population than the actual general population. And so we talk about early on unhealthy behaviors that can happen at a young age, survival sex, going into systems that are very unsafe. And not knowing where to get those support systems, not understanding what it's like to, be exposed to different situations and how to keep yourself safe. And so we talk a lot about prevention and trying to get young people into our programming prior to becoming homeless, because we know that that's really the only way that we can prevent this from happening on a long-term scale. But that's difficult when you're going against family systems, and there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it means to be a young LGBTQ plus person.
Now, Heather, when you started, you said that a lot of the challenges that LGBTQ plus youth face in homelessness are the same as any other youth. And while that may be true, I recently came across a sobering statistic that LGBTQ plus young people are 120% more likely to experience homelessness than non-LGBTQ youth. Right off the bat, these young people are presented with an uneven playing field. Why are they more adversely impacted by the effects of homelessness? And additionally, can you speak to how they're, whether they're Black, Hispanic, Latinx, are even more negatively impacted by homelessness?
Absolutely. You think about the layers of oppression and how that impacts a young person. So, sexual orientation, gender identity, but also race, also, language, culture, all of the things that come, that make us a person, all of our intersections of humanity can also play into that. And unfortunately, we know it's not an even playing field when you start talking about all those different intersections of people. And I will say, too, that mental health also plays into this. When a young person is told that they may not be accepted ever for who they are, when there are political systems that work against them, when there are family systems that work against them, then they internalize that information. And that in itself is a trauma. And so to be able to navigate through a system when you're already challenged because you're an adolescent, you're already going through all of the peer pressures that any adolescent would go through. And on top of it, you don't have the resources or the support that you need because you're not accepted for who you are. And so I think there's a big discussion that needs to happen about what it looks like for an LGBTQ young person as they come out when they're not supported. We know that there's much higher risk of suicidal ideation, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, all of the things that can happen. And if you do not catch that at a young age and try to work with the person, in a healthy way and establish an environment that's safe for them, then of course they're going to grow up and establish unhealthy habits, or get into systems that are going to be harmful in the long run for them. But certainly we know that LGBTQ people who are marginalized in other ways are at a much higher risk for this long-term effect in homelessness.
Now, undoubtedly, someone is saying, well, this doesn't impact me. I have a house. My children have homes. This doesn't really impact me. And sure, I care. I might donate some money to one of your organizations. But why is this a concern for the broader Central Florida community? Why should the people watching this and sharing this, why should it be a concern for them? Natasha, I'll start with you.
This is because this is our community. I mean, bottom line, right? Like, these are our neighbors. These are, this is the future of our city. And when we talk about the youth that are facing homelessness, as cost of living increases and things are changing within our society, it's going to be really important to support these people and give them the tools. I think that's a really big thing too, is right. They come in and because of the homelessness that they've experienced, a lot of our youth are lacking educationally. They're behind in school. And this is, especially for our youth right now, this is following COVID, where, students were schooling online, and we have this generation of homeless youth that didn't have access to do that. So they've just missed out educationally. So they're missing a lot of like the educational, they're missing the life skills, the tools that they need even to be successful moving forward. So if we're talking about the future of our community and our society, it's going to be really important to provide services to this population, to this young population, to continue, the security, the success of Central Florida as we continue to grow.
Yeah, and I think, Natasha, all of those things is exactly how I would answer that question. I mean, let's be honest, this is our future, right? So we're raising the next generation. It's our responsibility in many ways to make sure that the young population feels safe and that they have a house and that they are able to stabilize and become successful adults, because that's who we're going to be working with in the future. So I think it's just a matter of humanity. It's a matter of really understanding that we care about our community and that we care about our future.
Excellent. So can you tell me, can you expound on some of your team's biggest challenges in supporting your clients? What are your top priorities right now? So let's talk about challenges first, and then let's, talk about what are the priorities in meeting the needs of your clients.
So I would say within the coalition, I would say some of our biggest needs would actually be hands, like people. On an average day, we have about 60 youth within the coalition that qualify for services from the Innovation Youth Program. But when you think about, okay, we're going to work on education, that is one of our biggest needs right now, right, with our youth. So if you've got like 25 or 30 kids and we have, 2 to 3 staff members, the opportunity for us to physically sit and do homework or tutoring with each one of those kids individually and meet their individual needs, working with such a wide range of ages, it's not like we can just say, okay, we're going to do a math assignment today. You're not going to hit the needs of every single one of those kids because we have such a wide gap and such a large group of kids. So hands, like people actually, participating and wanting to, serve our kids in the community. That's probably one of our biggest needs. In addition to, within the coalition, for us, it would be space. Being able to have a space large enough to bring all of these kids together, to provide them with the adequate services that they need to be successful.
We have similar capacity issues, but I would say if I had to say that, talk about our biggest challenges, I would narrow it down to high mental health needs and the lack of resources in our community for ongoing residential care. We do offer housing, but we are not a 24-hour residential facility that can oversee the high mental health needs that come with some of our kids. And they need monitoring, they need support, long-term support that really, there's very limited resources here. And especially if you are experiencing homelessness and do not have insurance and are over the age of 18. Like, that's just sort of this, trifecta of challenges when it comes to receiving help or getting any resources. So there is that. And then for our age population tends to be a little bit older, that, we don't have a lot of affordable housing. And so you may have a young person. I currently have a youth who's working 3 jobs in our housing program, doing everything that they can to get off their feet, but having to stay in our program for longer than 6 months because even with 3 jobs, they simply can't afford rent. And so we have to be able to tackle the affordable housing problem here in Central Florida because it really does impact all of us. And for someone who is already experiencing homelessness and all of these other challenges, to be able to become a successful adult independently living is very, very difficult.
Yeah. So essentially, it's not enough to simply say end homelessness, right? That's a really big, vision of we must end homelessness. But it's actually important to prevent it from occurring in the first place. What should we as a community do to reduce and help prevent the occurrences of homelessness in our community, including youth, adults, and families?
So I would say like one of the biggest things that people can do is actually just become familiar, like we talked about earlier, with a lot of the agencies or organizations that provide these services. So, part of what we do too isn't just about, okay, you have a homeless family, let's provide them with services because now they're homeless. A lot of these agencies and HSN have diversion programs. So if it's simply about, being able to provide a certain set of, services or assistance to a family or an individual that can help prevent them from coming into our system, coming into the homelessness system, there are those resources out there and available to people. So it's just important for the community and people to familiarize themselves and educate themselves on the services that are available. 211 is a really great resource, or, HSN, any of the hubs that we have to provide resources to those individuals to prevent them from coming into homelessness.
Yeah, I echo prevention. It's key, and the amount of families who are experiencing homelessness, even within our school system, it's overwhelming. I mean, we really do have a major problem in our country in general, but even in Central Florida, I would say it's at such a high rate of need. And so we have to be able to support our organizations that are specializing in this. There are so many nonprofits doing great work, and we work really hard to be able to sort of, move the needle on this issue that is never ending. Can we really end homelessness? I don't know. I mean, I'm a hopeful person, but I think that that's a very difficult feat to climb. I think that we do know that there's better ways of recognizing things when kids are younger or when families are in school systems, knowing that they are experiencing homelessness, to be able to help them get off their feet by creating better programming and more affordable housing units.
Now, Heather, earlier when we spoke, you said that there is some key legislation right now that is impacting the LGBTQ youth that you serve in your organization and in general. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I have to say that our trans and non-binary youth are under attack across this country, and Florida is definitely high up there in being one of the most challenging states to live in for a young person who is transgender or non-binary. We have sports bills that have been passed, education laws that have been passed, and now we're going through some medical bans that will prevent our young people from getting any sort of medical care that they need as it relates to gender affirming care. So, beyond just the laws, what that does to a young person and how they internalize that is very, very challenging. And that's what we're seeing on this angle is working with them on trying to build confidence and trying to help them understand that there are people out there that support them. But the political in our world is very, very personal and absolutely impacts their daily experiences in schools. We have a lot of kids whose parents are very supportive of them and are pulling them out of the school system because of the lack of support and because of the laws that are happening right now. So we're starting to see this major shift in young people and how they are cared for on a day-to-day basis. Some of whom are not experiencing homelessness or not even at risk necessarily for homelessness, but just within our population of young people who are trans or non-binary. And so thank you for plugging the vote. Tomorrow is election day. I hope that everybody here goes out to vote tomorrow and really let their voices be heard.
Thank you. And Natasha, we also spoke earlier about how the rent increases are impacting homelessness. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's just gotten to a point, with the cost of living increasing and rental increases, it's just becoming challenging for, just like Heather mentioned, somebody who's working multiple jobs to be able to afford. I've even seen instances with some of our families where they'll have access to Section 8 housing, but Section 8 is disappearing. It's just, there's not the availability. And I've even seen people's Section 8 housing vouchers expire because they've just not been able to find housing that meets the criteria that they need. And so the housing and cost of living here is really, in Central Florida and really everywhere, but I've definitely seen the increase in Central Florida even over the last year. And it's becoming even more challenging for our families to be able to find jobs that have wages that will allow them to support themselves and, and their families, the youth that we serve. There's just a lot of families that are struggling with that.
And Heather, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think we've touched base on the major points that I would highlight. We have a lot of work to do here in Central Florida.
Yeah, I think that some of the conversations that have been most prevalent now is that you see more homeless people everywhere in a way that you hadn't prior to the pandemic, I think. And that particularly in the downtown area where I work, you see more people, men, women, and children on the sides of the street, and how that impacts our community. You see more tents set up in wooded areas and people who are leaving their homes and have nowhere to go. So this is a Central Florida problem. This is a community problem, and it's one that we all cannot turn away from because it really does impact us all as a community. So having said that, how can we join in on your missions of supporting, but also empowering those who are in transition in our community?
Well, one of the biggest ways would be to, make contact with an organization or any of the organizations that, you kind of are feeling pulled to, donating your time, like volunteering. I always, I'm a believer of, being the hands and feet, so to speak, and getting out there and engaging with the population. I think in some of my experience, with the homeless community, and especially our youth, they don't feel like they're seen, right? They feel almost like less than human. They're not treated the same, when they're in tents or walking on the side of the road. I've seen people treat them like stray dogs. It's heartbreaking. So just treating people with respect, coming in, talking with them, spending time, especially with our youth. I think that's the biggest thing is when people come in and volunteer their time and the kids feel like they're seen and that they're important and they do hold value. It makes them feel confident in who they are, and it does empower them to continue to keep going, no matter how much they don't want to be in a shelter or how difficult school might be, on top of, coming and having to go back to a shelter or being bullied at school because the other kids know that they, reside at the coalition. It's about just stepping up and getting out there and and advocating, also spreading the word. If you're going to volunteer, invite your friends, invite your family. And if you don't have the time, so I know people have busy schedules and maybe you don't have the time, but then see how, maybe financially you can donate or support. There's so many different ways to get involved. We have different agencies that come in to donate food to our kitchen because we are a shelter and we do community feed and we feed all the families breakfast, lunch, and dinner that are at the coalition. There's so many different ways to get involved. And so I would say that would be it, would just be get out there, get on the streets, get out to these agencies and help out any way you can.
We also accept volunteers and have many of the same opportunities. But I want to add to education. There are so many misconceptions, so much misinformation out there about the LGBTQ population, particularly as it relates to gender identity, transgender, and non-binary youth. And so I would say educate yourself. We do offer trainings at Zebra Coalition. I know we're going to plug you with our website. So you can certainly reach out to us to offer any of those trainings that we talk about the pillars for a transgender young person, what that looks like, how to support them. And so I think that's the biggest thing for our population is to really try to understand where they're coming from. And you can do that by educating yourself or volunteering in our community. So we'll make sure you have that resource here.
And why don't you go ahead, Heather? Would you please tell our viewers what resources are available to those in need, specifically in Orange and Osceola counties, and how they can connect with you?
Yeah, so of course, for our organization, it's Zebra Coalition, zebrayouth.org. You can also Google our website. We have mostly social media is how we make sure that we stay in touch with the community. All of our events are there. And also for the LGBTQ community, there are other organizations for adults over the age of 24. If you're interested in volunteering at the LGBTQ Center, that's one. And then we have various other organizations in the network. When you go to our website, we do have all of our partners listed, so you can find out more about how to get involved that way as well.
Awesome. And Natasha?
Yeah, so for the Coalition for the Homeless, our website is centralfloridahomeless.org. We also have volunteer opportunities. So if you are on our website, you can, click on the volunteer opportunities, or if you wanted to email, it's volunteer@cflhomeless.org. And again, you can also follow us on social media, primarily on our Instagram account, CFL_homeless. So there's a lot of opportunities to, volunteer with the youth program. We take volunteers pretty much every day of the week when we run programs, or, any other part of our agency in the kitchen, or on occasion too, we have people from the community who want to host specific events for our kids, whether it's like an end of school bash or we just had a trunk or treat event. So there's lots of different, like I said, there's lots of different ways to get involved.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being our guests this evening. And as we close out, I will give you an opportunity to say any last words that you might want to say, although I know you just gave all your information and told everyone how to get involved, but I don't want to end this conversation. It's been so good. I'm getting messages as we talk saying how wonderful the conversation has been. So please, any parting words that you would like to share with our audience?
I would just go ahead, Heather. Go ahead. Let's go.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you for talking about this issue, specifically about youth homelessness. Oftentimes, we don't think about our kids when we think about homelessness. So thank you for spotlighting that. And of course, our LGBTQ youth, please, please, please vote and let your voice be heard.
Yeah, I was going to say pretty much same thing. Like, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak about youth homelessness. Like Heather said, most people are shocked when I say I work with the youth at the coalition. They're like, there are homeless children. And so just, being aware that homelessness isn't specific to adults, a specific race, a specific gender, it impacts everybody of every age, every gender, every nationality. While I am hopeful that we can end homelessness, we can't do that without the support from the people in our community. So make sure you get involved. Like Heather said, get out there and vote. And and let's just keep working towards killing homelessness, getting rid of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, you have just witnessed another episode of Power of the Prosecutor. I'm your state attorney, Monique Worrell, and we do Power of the Prosecutor to educate the community on things that you need to know, things that impact our community, and as well as impact my office as the prosecutor. And it's very important that we understand how all of these things in our community work together. So thank you for being here on Power of the Prosecutor, and I will see you next month. Good night.